Imagine yourself on the bank of a river, your heart racing, your breath short. The murky waters reflect an unrelenting sun, while your eyes are fixed on the creature before you, a crocodile, its cold, impassive gaze holding hostage what you hold most dear, your child. The crocodile, with its mouth full of sharp teeth, proposes a deal. It will return the child only if you can correctly predict what it will do next. It seems like a simple challenge, but you quickly realize you're trapped in a snare. No matter your answer, the crocodile will always have a justification to retain control. This is not just a life or death dilemma, it's a paradox, a game of logic that challenges the foundations of reason and predictability. If you say it will return the child and it does, your prediction is correct and the agreement is fulfilled. But if it doesn't intend to return the child, your prediction is wrong and it has the perfect excuse to keep your child. The real problem arises when you state that the crocodile will not return the child. If it truly intends to keep the child, your prediction is correct and it is forced to return the child, creating a contradiction. But if it decides to return the child, your prediction was wrong and it shouldn't have returned the child. Whatever the outcome, it finds itself trapped in a logical impasse. This paradox is not merely an exercise in reasoning. It exposes a fundamental flaw in certain systems of power and control. In this scenario, the crocodile is more than just an animal. It symbolizes systems that establish rules that are impossible to meet, ensuring they will always be at an advantage. Governments, institutions, deceptive contracts, and manipulative promises often create dilemmas where any choice made by the individual leads to defeat. Consider, for example, the traps of bureaucracy. A citizen might need to present a document that can only be obtained if they already have another document, which in turn depends on the first. Just like the crocodile paradox, there is no clear solution. The same happens with political promises structured in a way that they can never be fulfilled, or with manipulative arguments that ensure the other party never has a way to come out victorious. This paradox also connects with other philosophical dilemmas, like the famous liar's paradox, where someone says, "I am lying." If the statement is true, then it is false. But if it is false, then it is true. It's a circular structure, a labyrinth with no exit. The crocodile paradox follows the same slippery logic, where trying to find a rational meaning only leads to more confusion. But there's another layer of analysis: trust. The situation presented by the crocodile is a dilemma of credibility. If a promise is made in such a way that its fulfillment depends on a paradox, can it truly be considered a promise? If an agreement is proposed in such a way that any answer leads to an unjust result, can it be considered a real agreement? This brings us to a reflection on language itself and its relationship to reality. Words can create scenarios that are logically impossible, yet still have an impact on the real world. The crocodile not only proposes a logic game, but also sets up a power game, where the rules exist not to be fulfilled, but to maintain its position of advantage. So, how can we escape this paradox? If the answer to the dilemma is unattainable, perhaps the solution lies in not playing at all. In some situations in life, the only way to win is to refuse to participate in a rigged game. Upon realizing that the agreement is an illusion, the best strategy might simply be to expose the fallacy and refuse to accept it as an option. In the end, the crocodile paradox isn't just challenging us to solve a logical puzzle. It's showing us the limits of rational thinking in the face of systems created to deceive. Sometimes true intelligence lies in recognizing when a choice is a trap and finding a way not to play by the imposed rules. And so, while you remain by the riverbank, staring into the crocodile's eyes, an understanding begins to emerge. Perhaps the dilemma was never about answering correctly. Perhaps the real question is, who truly holds the power to define the rules of the game? The ship of Theseus. Paradox is one of the most intriguing enigmas in philosophy, directly addressing issues of identity, continuity, and transformation. This reflection forces us to confront the nature of change and how it may or may not affect the essence of what we know. But what does it really mean to be the same when everything around us, or even inside us, is in constant flux? Imagine for a moment the famous ship of Theseus, the legendary Greek hero. He had a ship that over time began to deteriorate. Its parts wore out and were gradually replaced with new planks and pieces. The question then arises in a simple yet provocative way. Is this ship still the ship of Theseus after so many replacements? Or has it transformed into something completely new, with no connection to the original? But the situation becomes even more challenging. Suppose all the original planks, the ones that were removed over the years, are kept and later put together to form a new ship identical to the original. Which one would be the true ship of Theseus? The one that underwent constant modifications over time, or the one rebuilt with its original parts? This philosophical mirror game places us before a duality of identity and origin that seems to have no definitive answers. This paradox is not just a theoretical curiosity, it is reflected quite palpably in various areas of our daily lives, questioning what defines something as the same when changes are inevitable. First, there is the issue of personal identity. If all the cells in our body are periodically renewed, are we still the same person we were years ago? Is our identity marked by our memories, our actions, or simply by the fact that we are still here, alive, with a temporal continuity that connects us to the past? In a more concrete field, the paradox also arises in the world of objects and authenticity. If, for example, a work of art has parts restored or replaced over the years, can we still call it the original? When the conditions of the world require things to transform, to what extent can we maintain their essence? When does something cease to be what it was and become something new? And then there is the reflection on technology and society. Companies, institutions, and even countries evolve over time, changing their methods, their structures, and even their values. Are they still the same, or as they adapt and evolve, do they become something entirely different from what they originally were? In light of these questions, two major philosophical currents emerge that seek to provide an answer to the ship of Theseus dilemma. On one side, we have essentialism, which argues that something maintains its identity due to an unchanging essence. For essentialists, the ship of Theseus, even after all the parts are replaced, is still the same because its essence remains unchanged. What matters is not the physical matter of the ship, but the concept, the underlying idea that defines it as the ship of Theseus. On the other side, the gradual identity theory argues that identity is not fixed, but rather a continuous process of transformation. What we understand as being the same is not something static, but something that is constructed over time. In this case, the ship of Theseus, after so many changes, could be considered a new ship, with its own identity, the result of a constant metamorphosis. The ship of Theseus paradox places us at a philosophical crossroads, challenging us to rethink our understanding of continuity and identity. In a world that changes relentlessly, how can we define what is the same? Is our identity something unchanging, or like the ship, are we in constant reconfiguration, transformed by the experiences and choices we make? This paradox does not have a simple answer, but its true strength lies in making us question our deepest notions of what makes us who we are and what truly defines us in an ever-changing universe. The paradox of the prisoner condemned to be hanged is one of those philosophical riddles that, at first glance, seems challenging, but when examined more deeply, reveals something much more profound about our understanding of logic, surprise, and uncertainty. It is a mental game that questions what it means to predict the future and how fragile our certainty is about what seems to be rationally inevitable. Imagine a prisoner desperate to avoid his execution. He receives a message from the judge. He will be hanged at noon on a weekday next week, but crucially, his execution will be a surprise. he won't know the day until the executioner arrives. The prisoner then embarks on seemingly foolproof logical reasoning. If he is still alive on Thursday night, then the execution must occur on Friday, which would mean it would not be a surprise. Therefore, Friday is ruled out. Based on this logic, he successively eliminates the other days of the week. Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, until on Monday night, he concludes that the execution will never happen. Relieved, he goes to sleep confident that he has escaped his fate. But to his surprise, the execution happens on Wednesday and the prisoner is hanged. How is this possible when his reasoning seemed so clear and logical? What is at play here is not simply a logical mistake, but a fundamental failure in how the prisoner understands the very concept of surprise. The paradox reveals the complexity of trying to apply formal logic to situations involving unpredictability and uncertainty. The key lies in the prisoner's assumption that he can control and predict the execution based on his deduction, ignoring the role of surprise, which by definition escapes any attempt at anticipation. In his attempt to deceive the judge and thus avoid his execution, the prisoner ends up creating a situation where surprise is, in fact, guaranteed. He imagines that by eliminating all possible days, he is creating a logical situation in which he will not be hanged. But what he does not realize is that by assuming the execution cannot happen, he is, paradoxically, making the execution itself a surprise. This is the heart of the paradox. The anticipation and the attempt to avoid something create exactly the conditions for what he most feared to happen. This paradox is a powerful reflection on the limits of deductive reasoning. It highlights how even the most rigorous reasoning can be impotent in the face of uncertainty. The prisoner, in trying to apply pure logic to an event that includes surprise, ends up being led into a dead end. This intellectual self-sabotage, where he creates the conditions for his own downfall, makes us question the role of intuition and unpredictability in our lives. Furthermore, the paradox raises questions about the relationship between knowledge and uncertainty. When we try to use logical reasoning to avoid the unknown, what are we really trying to control? What happens when our own predictions and plans become so rigid that they blind us to the unforeseen realities and surprises of life? This paradox also has practical resonance in our daily lives. In our society, we often try to anticipate and control everything, from our careers to our relationships, believing that by understanding every detail, we can avoid what we don't want. Yet, surprise, this invisible and unpredictable force, often challenges our most secure assumptions. On a deeper level, the paradox of the hanging teaches us that surprise and uncertainty are not mere inconveniences, but intrinsic parts of our human experience. The attempt to anticipate everything, to eliminate the possibility of the unpredictable, can ultimately lead us to error. This is something that permeates our lives in small and large ways. The attempt to control the uncontrollable, to plan the unforeseen, ends up creating the conditions for what we most fear. What makes this paradox so seductive and disturbing is its ability to expose the tension between expectation and reality. The prisoner begins with certainty he can escape, but this certainty transforms into the very trap. The paradox not only questions the limit of logical reasoning, but forces us to confront one of life's greatest uncertainties, what we cannot predict, and what, by trying to anticipate, we end up generating in our own lives. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the hanging paradox is this: the only certainty we have is surprise. And perhaps this is the greatest teaching we can take from this story. Not matter how much we try to control events, there will always be something that escapes our reach, reminding us that ultimately the unexpected is an essential part of our existence. Imagine a simple yet enigmatic scenario. My nose is going to grow now. At first, this may seem like an intriguing puzzle, but as we delve deeper, it reveals itself as a bewildering philosophical and logical paradox known as the Pinocchio Paradox. The story of Pinocchio, the wooden puppet who comes to life, takes on an unexpected complexity when his nose grows whenever he lies. If Pinocchio claims that his nose is going to grow, we find ourselves in a logical dilemma that seems impossible to resolve. If Pinocchio's nose grows, that would indicate he is telling the truth. But on the other hand, if he is telling the truth, his nose shouldn't grow, since it only grows when he lies. If his nose doesn't grow, then Pinocchio is lying. But if he were lying, his nose should grow. Thus, no matter which path we take, we end up trapped in a cycle of logical contradictions that cannot be resolved. A true trap for reasoning. This paradox is part of a family of self-referential puzzles, like the liar paradox, where someone says, "This statement is false," creating a cycle of contradictions. However, the Pinocchio paradox is even more fascinating because, in addition to being a logical contradiction, it also involves a physical consequence, the growth of Pinocchio's nose, making the situation even more concrete and difficult to handle. To better understand the paradox, we must look at the relationship between truth and physical effect. In Pinocchio's world, cause and effect are clear. If he lies, his nose grows. But this relationship breaks down when he makes a self-referential statement like, "My nose is going to grow now," because the truth of the statement determines the growth of his nose. But at the same time, the growth of his nose should prove that he is lying, creating an endless cycle. The Pinocchio paradox challenges us to reconsider how we use language and how it reflects our understanding of reality. In our everyday lives, we use language to describe the world and make assumptions about whether a statement is true or false, with a clear distinction between the two. However, the Pinocchio paradox shows us that when language turns upon itself, it can create situations where the line between true and false becomes blurred, leaving us with no clear answers. This paradox also has profound philosophical implications about the nature of truth. What does it mean when a statement can simultaneously be both true and false? This question has been debated by philosophers for centuries, and the Pinocchio paradox brings this doubt to life, challenging us to confront the limits of our understanding of truth. Furthermore, the paradox offers an important lesson for logic and formal systems, such as those explored by the mathematician CROCODILE, who proved that any sufficiently complex formal system contains propositions that cannot be proven true or false within the system itself. The Pinocchio paradox serves as a playful reminder of this limitation, showing how self-reference can create problems that defy resolution. But the Pinocchio paradox is not just a theoretical puzzle, it also has real-world relevance. In fields like computer science and law, we often deal with self-referential systems that can get trapped in cycles of contradiction. For example, a computer program attempting to analyze its own code can become stuck in endless loops, just like Pinocchio. Similarly, legal systems can create rules that conflict, making it impossible to determine the correct solution. In psychology, the paradox reflects our tendency to question and overanalyze our own decisions, especially when we encounter complex or contradictory situations. Just like Pinocchio's statement, our own thoughts can get tangled, creating mental loops that are hard to escape. The paradox teaches us to approach such situations with curiosity and humility, recognizing that there aren't always simple, clear solutions. What can we learn from the Pinocchio paradox? First, it challenges us to question our assumptions about truth, logic, and language. It shows us that even the simplest ideas can become complex when viewed from a new perspective. Second, it encourages us to reflect on self-reference and the limitations of our understanding of the world. And finally, the paradox reminds us that puzzles are not just problems to be solved, but opportunities to explore the depths of thought, language, and reality. Therefore, the Pinocchio paradox is not merely a simple game with a wooden puppet and his growing nose. It is a portal to some of the deeper questions about how we interpret the world around us. By inviting us to embrace complexity and think beyond the surface, it shows us the beauty of paradoxes that make life endlessly fascinating. So the next time you hear Pinocchio say, "My nose is going to grow now," remember that he is not just creating a clever puzzle, but taking us on a journey through the mysteries of logic and meaning. The friendship paradox arises because people with many friends are more likely to be friends with others. Why think this way? If someone has 100 friends, they have 100 chances of being connected to you, whereas someone with only 2 friends has only 2 chances. In a real social network, with multiple connections and interactions, popular people act as hubs, disproportionately influencing the average number of friends of their friends. This situation is a direct consequence of the structure of social networks, both physical and digital. Think of a network of contacts as a graph, where each point represents a person and the connections between them are friendships. If one person has many connections, they serve as a bridge between several other people, increasing the chances that these people will also connect with each other. The more people are connected to a popular person, the more friends that person tends to have because they have more opportunities to be connected to others. This creates a discrepancy between the perception of those with many friends and those with few. Even if you and your friend share a social circle, the number of friends each of you has may be different simply because they are more connected. As a contact network functions, the popularity of a person within that network causes their friends to also have more friends. At the same time, those with fewer connections end up having fewer chances to become friends with others. This phenomenon can be visualized in terms of probabilities. If you're friends with someone who has many friends, the chances of other people who are also connected to this person becoming your friends increase considerably. In other words, your position within the social network depends not only on who you know, but also on who your friends know. The popularity of your friends can, in turn, increase your number of friends, even if you have a relatively smaller number of direct connections. This paradox doesn't just apply to casual social interactions, but also has implications in areas like business, professional networks, and even online group dynamics. People who stand out in their networks tend to expand their connections exponentially. For example, on platforms like LinkedIn or Facebook, it's more likely that someone with many followers or connections will be able to attract more contacts, creating a cycle of growing popularity. This dynamic explains why, in many situations, the people you consider more popular seem to have even more friends or followers than you. The mathematical explanation behind the friendship paradox helps to understand how social networks work, but it also brings up deeper questions about the nature of friendship and how people perceive themselves. By understanding this phenomenon, we can reflect on the impact of popularity on our own social relationships. People who have many friends or followers may seem more socially successful, but this doesn't necessarily mean their connections are deeper or more meaningful. The number of friends someone has is not a direct reflection of the quality of the relationships they maintain, but rather of the structure of the social network they are in. This paradox also makes us rethink the way we compare ourselves to others. In a world where digital social networks constantly amplify comparison, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that other people's popularity is a reflection of our own social value. However, understanding the friendship paradox can be liberating, as it allows us to realize that the number of friends shouldn't be the main indicator of success or happiness. Deeper and more meaningful relationships, rather than more superficial ones, are often more rewarding. Furthermore, the friendship paradox also helps us understand why some people always seem to be surrounded by others, while others struggle to build a solid network. People who have a larger base of friends or contacts are likely in environments where there are more opportunities to form these connections. They may also be more willing to invest in their social network, which further increases their chances of making new friends. In contrast, those who maintain a more restricted circle may have difficulty expanding their networks simply because they are more isolated or have less access to new social circles. The paradox of choice. The paradox of choice is that tolerance is not a static principle, but a dynamic process that requires constant effort to be maintained. In the end, the paradox does not weaken the idea of tolerance. It strengthens it, showing us that true tolerance does not consist in accepting everything, but in standing firm in the defense of what matters. The most chosen paradox is imagining yourself walking into an ice cream shop, craving something sweet and ready to indulge. But instead of the usual 5 or 6 flavors, you're greeted with 50 options: chocolate, vanilla, pistachio, salted caramel, mango, rocky road, and many others. At first you're excited, but as you try to decide, you start to feel overwhelmed. You think, what would happen if I chose pistachio but missed out on the salted caramel? What if rocky road was the best choice? What should be a simple and joyful decision turns into a stressful and exhausting ordeal. The paradox of choice is the idea that, although more choices may seem better, they can actually leave us less happy, more anxious, and ultimately less satisfied with the decisions we make. This concept challenges one of modern society's greatest assumptions, that freedom of choice is always a good thing. The paradox of choice was popularized by psychologist Barry Schwartz, who argued that having too many options can paralyze us. When we are faced with an overwhelming number of choices, we often struggle to make a decision. Think about it. How many times have you spent hours browsing streaming platforms, unable to pick a movie, only to end up watching something familiar again? The more options we have, the harder it is to decide, because each choice comes with the fear of missing out on something better. But the paradox doesn't stop at indecision. It also affects how satisfied we feel after making a choice. Let's go back to the ice cream shop. You finally choose salted caramel, but as you eat it, you can't help but wonder if you would have liked pistachio better. Even though the salted caramel is delicious, your enjoyment is diminished by the nagging thought of what you might have missed. This is known as post-decision regret, and it's one of the main forms of the paradox of choice. Choice harms our happiness. One of the reasons this happens is because of something psychologists call opportunity cost. Every time we make a choice, we are also choosing not to do something else. When there are only a few options, the opportunity cost seems small. But when there are dozens or hundreds of possibilities, the cost of what we didn't choose seems enormous. We become hyper-aware of the alternatives we passed up, and this makes it harder to fully enjoy the option we chose. Another factor at play is our own expectations. The more options we have, the higher our expectations. If you have only 3 flavors of ice cream to choose from, you might be happy with whatever you pick. But when there are 50 options, you expect the perfect flavor, one that will surprise you. And if the salted caramel doesn't deliver that impossible level of satisfaction, you feel disappointed, not because it wasn't good, but because it wasn't perfect. The paradox of choice shows us that more options don't just give us more freedom, they also give us more room for disappointment. Interestingly, the paradox of choice doesn't affect everyone in the same way. Some people are known as maximizers, and they feel compelled to find the best possible option in any situation. Maximizers are those who will read hundreds of reviews before buying a phone or spend hours researching restaurants before picking a place to eat. While this carefulness may seem like a good thing, it often leads to stress and dissatisfaction because maximizers are constantly worried about whether they made the right choice. On the other hand, satisficers are people who look for good enough, make decisions quickly, and don't obsess over what they might have missed, which often makes them happier and more relaxed. The paradox of choice has profound implications for how we live our lives. Today, we are bombarded with options: what to eat, what to wear, what to watch, where to live, who to date, what career to pursue. On the surface, this abundance of choices seems empowering, but in reality, it can lead to decision fatigue. a state where the simple act of choosing leaves us exhausted and less able to make good decisions. So, how do we navigate the paradox of choice? One solution is to embrace the idea of what is good enough instead of obsessing over finding the perfect option. We can learn to value the choices we make and let go of what we didn't choose. Another strategy is to set limits on the number of options we consider. For example, instead of endlessly scrolling through a streaming platform, we could choose from the first 5 movies we see, simplifying our decision-making process. By doing this, we reduce stress and increase satisfaction. The paradox of choice also teaches us a deeper lesson about happiness. True happiness doesn't come from having unlimited options. It comes from being present and content with the choices we make. This reminds us that freedom isn't having infinite possibilities. It's having clarity and confidence to choose without regret. In the end, the paradox of choice isn't just about ice cream flavors or streaming platforms. It's a reflection of how we navigate the complexity of the modern era. Life challenges us to rethink our assumptions about freedom and happiness and to recognize that sometimes less really is more. By understanding this paradox, we can make better decisions, find greater peace of mind, and ultimately live more fulfilling lives.